It's murder viewers. Welcome to today's case, which takes us to York, a cathedral city with Roman origins and a Viking past situated in North Yorkshire. It was also home to Simon Gilchrist, Caroline Moorhood and their two children. Sadly, on the 26th of July 2004, Caroline Moorhood would end up ending Simon Gilchrist's life in a drunken rage. Simon Gilchrist, 23, was a happy and caring person with a good sense of humour. He had a good relationship with his mother and his brother and just enjoyed living a happy and what most would consider normal life. In 2002, though, Simon's life would change, and at first it was for the better. Through friends, he had just met the love of his life, Caroline Moorhood, 21. The pair met and instantly hit it off. They quickly went from friends to in a relationship. One thing though, Moorhood was already pregnant with another man's baby. This wasn't a problem for Simon, he was smitten. He moved into Moorhood's place at Belfarm Avenue and supported her as if he was the biological father of her unborn child, attending all her antenatal classes and such like. They even got engaged to be married. Wrapped up in his new relationship, Simon began to see a lot less of his family and friends. No one really thought anything of it. Most of us know what it feels like to be in love. A few months into the relationship, Simon made a rare visit to see his mother. She was delighted, but she had noticed a few marks on his face. Of course, she quizzed him about it, but instead, he insisted everything was fine and she believed him, thought nothing else of it. It wouldn't be long till Moorhood became pregnant with Simon's child. By the time the child was born, Simon had very little contact with the outside world outside of work. Simon had a good job working as a fibre optic engineer and had a good relationship with his boss and co-workers. After the baby was born, Simon's mum would nip round every other day to do laundry and prep food. She noticed that her son wasn't himself, but she couldn't understand why. She knew he was working full-time with two kids to look after, one of which being a newborn, but she knew her son. She just couldn't figure out what was wrong. One day she went round, there was blood on the doorstep, but she didn't think too much of it at the time. Hindsight allows us to see things a lot clearer, but by then it's always too late. May 2004, Simon's 23rd birthday was around the corner. When his mum asked what he wanted, he said he could do with some cash to buy some tools for work. She happily obliged. Simon had also arranged to go out with his two best friends from school to watch an England match. No doubt he was excited. It had been a long time since he had had any time for himself. Before the day of the match, though, Simon rang his mother and asked if she would babysit the kids. When his mother asked why, he told her that Caroline wanted to go with them to the footy game. She agreed to babysit, even though she thought it a bit odd. She suspected if she didn't, Simon might not get a chance to enjoy his birthday. She also discovered that Simon had spent his birthday money on an England shirt for Moorhood. On the 26th of May 2004, Simon's mum started a new job. She called him after her shift had ended around 6 p.m. He was cleaning the oven. Moorhood had gone out with her friends, which I believe was a regular occurrence. They chatted and then said their goodbyes. That would be the last time ever she would hear his voice. Whilst out with her friends, Moorhood began downing double shots of Bacardi to the point she could barely stand or talk. She was in the Marcia pub in Bishopthorpe when she launched an unprovoked attack against a female who was sitting down, basically minding her own business. Moorhood punched, slapped and pulled her hair, leaving her in tears, and so shaken she was unable to attend work the next day. Moorhood was kicked out of the pub. It was just after 11 p.m. Her friend helped her to a waiting car and she escorted her home, helping her up the steps to her flat. Simon, understandably, was not happy at the state Moorhood had arrived home in and was heard expressing that fact. The argument escalated and in a fit of rage, Moorhood grabbed a 6-inch knife from the kitchen and plunged it into Simon. He went running out of the apartment to the payphone on the street and called himself an ambulance. He then collapsed. Police and ambulance arrived at the scene around 11:45 p.m. and Simon was rushed to hospital. Unfortunately, Despite every effort, he would not be able to survive his injuries and was declared deceased on his arrival. Moorhood was arrested and taken in for questioning. She told the police, "I love him. I can't live without him. He went for me. I have killed him." She was charged with murder 3 days later. Post-mortem revealed Simon had died from a single stab wound through his ribs, piercing his heart and liver. At the trial, which I think began in January 2005, Caroline Moorhood pled not guilty to murder, claiming self-defense. But it only took the jury a couple of hours to reach a verdict of guilty. She was sentenced to life in prison to serve a minimum of 12.5 years, minus time served. Simon's mum didn't manage to connect the dots until the trial, where she learned of her son's suffering throughout the 18-month relationship. The truth of it is, though, nobody really thinks about male domestic violence. Here are a few things his devastated mother had to say some years after the trial. "I got a call while I was in bed at maybe 11:45 p.m. from my daughter-in-law saying that she had received a funny call from someone who lived near Simon to say there had been an ambulance at his apartment. You'd think that you would connect, but you just don't. You go through the motions. I rang the police and they told me that someone would come out to see me. I woke my husband up and then the police arrived and told us that Simon was dead. They didn't say how he had died. I don't remember this, but my husband said that I screamed and I made a noise like a wild animal. I then had to phone my daughter-in-law and tell her that Simon was dead and that she would have to wake my other son up. When we got to their house, my grown-up son was lying on the couch in the fetal position because he had gone into shock. The murder trial was when I realised the depth of what Simon had to live with. All the pieces gradually started to come together in court. The elderly couple who lived next door had told the police they often heard Caroline shouting and that sometimes it sounded like things were being thrown, but they said they never heard Simon raise his voice or argue back. I had only seen marks on his face twice, but looking back, in the summer of 2003, I had gone to their flat when a neighbour pointed out to some blood on the floor outside Simon and Caroline's front door. You think about these things afterwards. I remember wondering how I hadn't seen the depth of it. When I pieced together details like his isolation, the constant calls, not spending money on himself, the marks on his face, the shouting neighbours heard, I can see now my Simon was clearly a male victim of domestic abuse. Josie Linnane, Simon's mother, is now an advocate for male victims of domestic abuse. Thank you for joining me today. And if you are or think you might be suffering from domestic abuse, male or female, please tell someone. I will leave links and phone numbers in the description. Reach out if you need to.